right. Okay, so here it is, the Q&A, and we'll fire these questions at Dr. Voss, but Dr. Swisher's here to help out, and I might even pitch in if I feel like I have something to say. And so I have one question that's come in via text message, so we'll start with that. But I encourage you to keep them coming, and then we'll entertain questions just from the pews if you have them. But here's a question I have that came in via text. It says, how do we as a church bridge this topic with young people as they are being influenced by the culture? How do we bridge this topic with young people as they are being influenced by the culture?
That really is a very good.
Oh, you're on. Go. You're good.
He's got you.
Okay, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, that is an excellent question, and I'll tell you what, I don't have easy answers for that because the culture is so pervasive. But just one thing here, and this is, I'm going to give you a little bit of an illustration here. A few years ago, I looked at some research that looked at the amount of time that children spent on screens. And this is even before the cell phone thing became as epidemic as it has become. And then they compared that to the amount of time that they had with fathers. It was incredibly diverse. I mean, some of that research looked like actual one-on-one time with a father by a child was sometimes no more than 10 minutes in a week. But look how many television programs roll through their minds, and now YouTube and on the internet, the stuff that impacts our brain, the things we're exposed to, there's a principal neurologist says the neurons that fire together wire together. So the more exposure you get to whatever it is you get, the more that's what you become. And so part of it is our young people need more, and I'll be very specific, relational activity within our church. That's the thing. And the church can't do it all. To be frankly honest, the church helps and supports, but it really is a mom and dad thing. I'm going to say it that way.
Anything to add to that, Sam? Yeah, I'll just say a little something here. I mean, that is a tough thing to know. You know, we can talk theoretically about what the Bible teaches and why it's important, but how do you bridge that with young people? And I think what you said was excellent. I mean, of course, relationships are huge. I would just add to that sometimes we might be tempted to try to make something look cool and in some way acquiesce to young people's desire to be with it in the culture, and sometimes might even compromise when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to anything. Kind of go halfway, compromise a little bit, say, okay, well, you can still be cool and do this or that, but instead, what if we just challenge them to be countercultural? And well, in a sense, this might be doing the same thing in a different way, because the thing is, youth, there is an appeal to be a rebel, to go against the status quo, and there's right ways to do it and there's wrong ways to do it. And so I think we need to go full force and say, yeah, you're going to be different from everybody else, and embrace that, rather than trying to say, okay, well, you can kind of blend in, you can kind of look like everybody else, and give in a little here or there. It's what we see in Scripture, isn't it? We see this full force. You need to not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be renewed or transformed by the renewing of your mind. Right. And so, we have to push full force.
I'm going to add one more thing to that. I just finished collecting some data here last year or so on looking at religious beliefs among people and why people reject belief. And one of the things I found is that for those people who grew up in religious settings and they rejected their belief, you know what age which they by and large did it? Pardon? Actually, it's younger than that. It's really middle school age. They just don't tell you. They kind of fake it and live with it for a while, and we kind of blame it on what happens at college. But a large part of the decision has been made already by the time, and this is what they told me. This is what they told me in the research. It's really about the middle school years, 14, 15, that those decisions are largely already made.
Forgive me, I was looking up something on my computer here, because something that you said about music and the entertainment that we have, how it affects us. And a quote came to mind that I shared in a sermon once, so I had to pull up my old sermon notes. This is Andrew Fletcher, 17th century. He says, "If a man were permitted to make all the ballads, he need not care who should make the laws of a nation." So we think about music, but we can expand that to movies and television and the internet, but particularly the entertainment industry. That has far more effect on people than any laws that we could make. And so we think about, kind of like you say, kids are just mindlessly glued to their phones and to this stream of entertainment, and it's not benign. I mean, they're trying to tweak the way that you see things, right? They're making things that are not normal seem normal, and it's very, very intentional, and it's very, very powerful. And so, of course, we need to be careful and set boundaries for our kids, but also we need to teach them to think and to see that, okay, whenever you do watch something, because we can't shelter them from everything. So when you do watch something, think about what they're trying to teach you. Think about the worldview that they're trying to give you. Don't just sit passively, and that's important for us as adults as well. You sit back, you watch a movie, you let your guard down, you think, oh, I'm just enjoying this. No, they're feeding you a certain worldview, and if you don't know that, then you are being affected by it in a passive way. So that's hugely important. All right, let me see if I have any other text questions that have come in. It doesn't look like I do.
Chad?
Yes.
I read an article last week that really disturbed me, and it was about the just explosion of pornography on the internet, especially involving children. And I mean, children, even toddler age, actual videos, film, and I don't know how that could ever be controlled. It's disturbing because it's out there, and it's just an explosion. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Well, I know there's an explosion. In fact, I didn't take time to give that stat here, but I'll try to find it if I can here. It looks at the pornography thing by comparison to other addictions, and just so I can put that correctly. The Barna Group in the U.S., okay, so this is 2014, 79% of men, 76% of women aged 18 to 13 said they viewed pornography in the last month. 63% of men, 21% of women say they viewed pornography several times a week. And if you go down a little bit further in some of that, 78.9 billion porn videos were viewed on one well-known porn site in just 1 year. 78.9 billion videos. And that's already a few years old, and it's growing. In my work, I work with sexual addictions, and it's a tough thing. And the internet and these little handheld phones, I tell you what, we didn't let our kids have the phones until they got a little bit older, but even at that, shut your Wi-Fi's off at night, collect them, they didn't have them in their rooms at night. I know those are hard rules, but I just know I had little 11-year-old girls that had already been filled with pornographic images. The kids told her what to look at on her tablet, and she was innocent, she looked at it, and now she just couldn't quit looking at the stuff. And so, that's one example, but I'm real skeptical about schools that put tablets and what in all these kids' hands. I mean, that's the standard, what's happening in public education. I'm not a believer in it. I think it's too dangerous.
I had a seminary professor once say, who of you would put a chest with, let's say a handful of magazines and some of the most beautiful people in the world, pornographic material, in a chest, and then put it under your child's bed and say, don't look at that. That sounds absurd, right? But when we put a smartphone in our teenagers' hands, sometimes even much younger than teenagers, that's essentially what we're doing. And so there do need to be boundaries, and frankly, even for adults as well. I mean, it's a good idea to look into various companies that have safeguards and things like that.
Here's the other stat. This is 10 years old already, but 1.9 million cocaine users, this is US, 2 million heroin users, 40 million regular porn users.
What else? Any other questions?
I've got one for Nick to ask. Stephen, have you connected any of this, or I'd just like to know your thoughts on the preferred pronoun phenomenon that we're seeing today, how that might relate to some of this, or does it?
I'll tell you what, I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson, who just says enough is enough, he's not gonna do it. And so that's kind of where I'm at on that. But what happens is that all these little subtle changes begin changing how you think about something. So for example, if we're going to have Christmas come pretty soon, we're going to have some of that white stuff that falls on the ground, we're going to call it snow. We have one word for it. But if you grow up in Arctic regions, there's a whole lot of different words for snow. Or if you're a cross-country skier, you know that there's snow that's related to different kind of ski wax you use. There's a lot of different words for it, but all those different words create a different mentality about snow. You start changing with the words change concepts, and concepts impact behavior. So, that's my thought on that.
So as Christians, how do we love those who live a different lifestyle, share Christ with them, yet not make it seem like we think that they're doing it okay?
Did you all hear that?
Yeah. That's a tough one because it's clear that there's boundaries, but at the same time, one of the passages I didn't share there was when Jesus goes to the house he goes to the tax collector's house, and he's also meeting with a woman who comes in and starts pouring oil on his feet, presumably a prostitute. And the people around said, does he not even know who he's dealing with here? Well, how can he be sitting with her? And Jesus then goes in and explains this, but essentially, he was not afraid to rub shoulders with people who were in these different patterns of behavior. And the fact that he was open and loving created an opportunity, and I will say the application for us is that by being in a relationship rather than shunning people, it gives us opportunity for dialogue. And some people who get stuck in sinful patterns deep enough, you finally just want help. And we can be there when they need it. But we're probably not going to logically talk them out of some of this, to be frankly honest. I just haven't found that to be very useful.
What did you say you found to not be useful, Mr. Ball?
Logically talk them out of it.
Logically.
It's when the wheels fall off the bus and they need somebody, and you've established that relationship with them, then you have the opportunity.
Thank you.
I would add to that. Oh, I think I'm better. I'll just, yeah, thanks.
I would add to that that it's important that we model and teach people what it is to truly love somebody, because our culture says to love somebody is just to accept them. And that's going to greater and greater extremes. I mean, a 6-year-old who wants to transition their gender, oh, well, we want to love them, we want to accept them. And so if this girl says she's a boy, then that's not love, that's child abuse. And yet our culture is going to these extremes to where we say, well, to love somebody, we're just going to have to accept whatever lifestyle they're in. And so that's a real seemingly obvious example, but even when it comes to homosexual lifestyle and things like that, we want to say, okay, the reason we say this is wrong and the reason we're trying to speak into your life is because we don't believe that this is ultimately good for you as a human being. Now, first of all, of course, we want to present Jesus to them and say that we're all sinners and we all need Jesus. But part of coming to Jesus is turning from sin and recognizing that Jesus is better than any sin that we might be tempted with. But sometimes I think as Christians we can kind of shrink back when people say, oh, well, you need to love, and again we kind of acquiesce to the culture's definition of love and say, okay, well, yeah, we want to be accepting, we don't want to step on any toes, and of course we do want to be gentle, and we want to be thoughtful and caring in what we say, but we want to speak the truth, and we want to recognize that love speaks the truth and seeks what's best for people.
Any other questions?
How much do you think that the culture today's broken homes have play a lot about what we've got.
I think a lot of it actually.
Talking about parenting and
The divorce culture is one, and I'm not saying this to shame anybody who struggled through that, but just theoretically from that concept, what happens is it breaks homes. And this is one thing, talk about Johnson's war on poverty back in the 1960s. What nobody says is one of the leading causes of poverty is divorce. And then you got, so that's one issue. Then you got issues such as, what does that do to the psyche of a child who sees stability and predictability fall apart, and trust. And trust begins to eat away, or the lack of trust begins to eat away at the ability to trust, which now impacts their relationships some days. And I think what we're seeing right now is people don't even marry because they can't trust. In psychology, we call it an attachment issue. We see a lot of either disorganized attachment or just unhealthy, anxiety-prone, distancing kind of behaviors that don't allow people to really get close because they don't trust. But again, this eats away the very fabric of what the God's design is. The two shall become one, and which is an intimacy and a closeness. So anything that begins to rob that is dangerous. And divorce is one, but it's not the only. But then, looking at sexual behaviors, how many people end up separating or divorcing out of sexual deviancy? Adultery, pornography, loss of jobs. The statistics are high on some estimates, maybe one out of three porn users eventually lose their job out of that. What does that do to family security?
What kind of resources locally do we have to help with the homosexual problem? We have someone that we can refer to.
That's a tough question. I don't have an answer for that.
Nothing local?
I mean, part of what you're doing here tonight is it's important to become knowledgeable, and maybe a sequel to this is to kind of even brainstorm, what do we do? If there's nothing there, how can we be helpful in this? But again, I don't think that a culture butting at heads is going to resolve this issue. It's just not going to. I mean, I don't think we're going to back up as a culture on this issue, but we have to be like the New Testament people who they live in that same thing and worse, and they figured out how to grow a church in that context, and we can too.
Well, I think we'll close it with that. I think there's a lot more questions that could be asked, and so if you have another question, maybe you can just catch Dr. Voss before you leave. I'm sure he'll stay around for a few more minutes. But I'll go ahead and close us out for tonight, and want to remind you that the topic for tomorrow night is Dr. Jeff Brown. Yeah, thank you. Jeff Brown. He's going to be speaking on the question, isn't the Bible full of contradictions? The answer is no, but there's a lot of accusations of that, and so he's going to walk us through that and how to handle that and how to properly look at the Bible. So I think that'll be a great talk. We'll have Q&A and do all that as well. So looking forward to that. But I will go ahead and dismiss you now. So have a good evening. Hope to see you tomorrow night.